The hawthorn is part of the rose family. We're actually going to go through a lot of shrubs right now that are part of the rose family, and I'll try to remember to tell you when that family is over. So, we have the pin cherry and the choke cherry. So how do we tell those two apart? Well, we know from before if it has, excuse me, brown hairs on it, on the back vein, then it's a black cherry tree. So if it's a pin cherry shrub, it's going to look quite similar. Lanceolate shaped with a very long apex, finely serrated margins, pinnate venation, even arcuate venation a little bit. So the difference is you're not going to find that hair along the vein. And also, it's usually smaller because it's a shrub, so it's usually smaller than a black cherry tree. And the leaves are longer. The black cherry tree leaf it's a little wider, closer to the top compared to the pin cherry. And then we have the choke cherry. So you can see that it's very different in shape. It's a lot rounder, it's more oblong shaped. It has a very obtuse apex compared to the pin cherry. And the choke cherry also has those serrated margins. Another way to tell that a plant itself or a leaf itself is a cherry is to look close to the stem. There's a good example here. And there usually you find nodes, so you can see those right there. Alright, we'll move on. Excuse me. So, I'm going to compare wild red raspberry and common blackberry, and we're still in the rose family here. So this is a sample of wild raspberry. The top of the leaf is very green in nature. The bottom of the leaf is gray in nature and is actually quite soft. You have thorns or little bristles along the stem. I don't know if you can see those, but they're there. Quite egg-shaped leaves. And a big thing about the raspberry is that it comes in either 3 leaves or 5 leaves, and these bottom 2 leaves are going to be further away from the top leaf than the top 2 leaves. So these 2 are further away, and these 2 are closer to the apex leaf, let's call it that. And here we have a blackberry. So as you can tell, they do actually look quite different when they're beside each other. Let's move on to the common blackberry leaf. We're going to call it palmately compound. So what that means is that when all 5 leaves depart from the stem, they make a hand shape, like a palm shape. Bam, right? There's my hand. So each one is almost like a finger, and it makes a hand shape. And there's a smaller sample of that. And that's actually, this is the front side of the leaf that's green. This is the back side of the leaf that's much paler. So there's the front side green. And it also has thorns, which you can see in this sample right there. Alright. So still in the rose family, we're again going to be comparing 2 different shrubs. There are a lot of shrubs that look similar to each other. So we're going to compare the prickly wild rose and the smooth wild rose. And you may have guessed it, one big difference is that the prickly wild rose has a lot of thorns and bristles along its branches and multiple trunks. Whereas, I shouldn't call them trunks, they're just large branches or stems that come from the ground. And the smooth wild rose has a lot less of those, and the ones that it does have are usually just close to the base of the plant. So this is a prickly wild rose, and you can see the thorns along the rose stem. And this is a smooth wild rose, and as you can see there are no prickles. The difference between them in shape you can also tell. The teeth on the smooth wild rose are a lot more prominent than the teeth which still exist on the prickly wild rose leaf. They're both similarly shaped, both oblong shaped, but as you can see, these guys have a much more pointed apex, whereas these guys have a more rounded apex. And this is the prickly wild rose, and this is the smooth wild rose. So, comparing again, we're going to be comparing the American mountain ash and the showy mountain ash. They look very similar, and they're hard to distinguish. So the reason it's called showy mountain ash is because it usually has much brighter berries and berries in larger bunches than the American mountain ash. So here we have an American mountain ash leaf. And what I want you to notice is the teeth and the lanceolate shape and the very acute or even acuminate apex that has, very pointed apex. And here we have an example of the showy mountain ash. So the difference being, excuse me, is that it's more oblong shaped instead of lanceolate shaped. It still has teeth and it still has an acute apex. Another difference in terms of oblong versus lanceolate shaped, there's a good comparison right there, is that these American mountain ash leaves tend to be longer than the showy mountain ash leaves. So showy mountain ash leaves tend to be wider and shorter. American mountain ash leaves tend to be longer and thinner. Longer and thinner American mountain ash, wider and shorter showy mountain ash. Alright, wintergreen. This is one of my favorites. And we just finished the rose family. So all those were in the rose family. Now I've moved on to the heath family. So wintergreen is very short. It grows only about 15 centimeters tall. And it's found on forest floors in bunches. And here we have an example of it. This is the wintergreen berry. So I will say that you can see at the top of each of these rounded teeth, I'm not even sure if you can see it in the video, but there are tiny bristles that poke out from each, there's one, you can see that, poke out from each rounded tooth. Wintergreen, if you chew on one of these leaves, it will taste like wintergreen. If you eat one of these berries, it will taste like wintergreen. Very cool plant. Oh, low sweet blueberry. I'm sure this is someone's favorite shrub because yes, it produces low sweet blueberries that we can eat. So, usually the leaves are lanceolate and shaped. They have tiny, fine teeth along the margins. Not sure if you can see that because of the focus. You can down here. And they actually have tiny bristles, tiny bristles that come off of those teeth as well, and you will not be able to see them in the video. Usually this plant is very low, so 35 centimeters or lower. And if it's July to August, you'll know what it is because you'll find the blueberries and you'll eat them. Labrador tea, another one of my favorites because it has a very cool feature. This is also found on this forest floor and usually in wet organic sites. That's what it likes. It looks like a leaf. Has some entire margins, it's oblong shaped. Coolest part, as you can see here, but I'll turn to this side because you can actually feel it. Oh, that's nice. Very, very soft, woolly, white to brown, rusty brown hairs. So that's one way to tell a Labrador leaf. You just turn it over and feel it and you'll know what it is right away. Labrador tea leaf, I should say. It's called Labrador tea. Now we have Princess Pine. Like wintergreen, it's a very thick, waxy, leathery leaf. Has dentate margins, so you can see all those teeth. It grows very shallow, so sometimes when you're pulling a leaf off for a sample, you may pull the whole plant out of the ground, so be careful about that. Another thing to say about this leaf is that, or the plant itself, the shrub, is that the leaves grow in whorls. So again, they grow around the branchlet. And there's Princess Pine for you. Red Osier Dogwood. There are a few dogwoods. This is the Red Osier Dogwood. One way to tell that a leaf is a dogwood leaf is that you can see it has parallel veination, which means that all the veins go right up to the apex of the leaf. It might be easier to see on the back there. Yeah, there you go. So Red Osier Dogwood gets its name from the bark, which is red colored or dark purple, and that's one way to tell what kind of dogwood it is. You also see that this Red Osier Dogwood is quite egg-shaped and has entire margins. Alright, snowberry. This is a very cool plant. This is a snowberry leaf. You can see the snowberry right at the top. Turn it over so you can see it better. This snowberry stays through the winter. So all the leaves fall off the plant and the berry's still there. So that's one way to tell what kind of plant it is. Otherwise, The leaves are very round in shape, and it's a bush that is low spreading, so it's quite round in nature. Excuse me. Common hobble bush. I would just like to mention that I'm not sure how common this plant is in the Ottawa Valley area. This was a very difficult one to find. So that's the common hobble bush leaf for you. It's almost kidney shaped, very round shaped. We have an acute apex. We have serrated margins. And usually these leaves get very large, and that's one way to tell them apart from other things. They get very large. You might confuse this common hobble bush with the American basswood. However, the American basswood is a tree and has a very distinct trunk, whereas the common hobble bush is a shrub and its trunk isn't distinct. It usually has a bunch of trunks that come from the same area in the ground. We're getting close to the end. We have a high bush cranberry here. It kind of looks like a maple leaf. That's one thing to distinguish it. Another thing is the red berries that grow on it, which you can actually eat. I've tried one. They're very bitter. Again, we suggest not eating anything. Don't do what I do. It's lobed, the margins, as you can see, and it's palmately veined. And these leaves can actually look quite different from each other, just like any leaf on any plant. Ooh, okay, we have a kicker here. We have poison ivy. I was really scared to collect this because I didn't want to contract poison ivy, but I got it, and here it is. Poison ivy can be found in a lot of places, usually along forest edges, and especially off the path. So if you're wandering in the forest, try not to go off the path, because most likely you'll find some of this. What's distinguishable about poison ivy? It has 3 leaves, always. The top leaf has a very long stem, whereas the bottom 2 leaves have shorter stems. The margins of a poison ivy leaf are very irregular. See how this one has 2 sides that are toothed, whereas this one only has 1 side right here that is toothed. This guy has 1.5 sides that are toothed, so they're quite irregular in their margins. Grape wood vine. This is a vine. It can, grow or vine about 5 meters or more. It's a compound leaf, so what that means is, this is a better example, off the stem, 5 different leaves come out. Excuse me. And it will grow across the ground, fences, trees, really anywhere that it can climb. Egg-shaped in nature, serrated margins, very acuminate apex almost. And it turns a really nice color in the fall. Okay, Virginia Virgin's Bower. Every part of this plant is poisonous, and it can cause skin irritation, so please be careful. It's okay now because it's laminated, so don't worry. So one thing that you can tell, that helps you tell it's Virginia Virgin's Bower, is this stuff right here. These are flowers, actually, even though they look quite feathery, and they're all over the plant. Another way to tell is the compound leaf. It always has 3 leaves off the stem. They're quite egg-shaped in nature. They almost have some lobes along the margins, and they also have toothed or serrated margins. And they grow everywhere. They take over once they start growing. This shrub is kind of like a creeping vine, so it creeps everywhere. And now we're going to move on to the 3 non-native shrubs that we have, and they're the last ones. The first one is common lilac, heart-shaped, as you can tell, or kidney-shaped, a very cordate base. This leaf, when you first feel it, is very, very waxy, very almost a thick feeling. And that's called a glabrous, or glaucous, when it has that waxy feeling. And I'm sure you've all seen lilac flowers before, which can grow from white to purple, even different colors on what looks like one shrub.